It's great news. It's partial redemption for President Obama, who has gone after whistleblowers and leaks very fiercely, much more harshly than he ever needed to. But this long shot commutation of Chelsea Manning's 35-year sentence to time served plus a few months is a wonderful thing. We're going to need whistleblowers and leakers more than ever under a Donald Trump presidency. And this is a shot in the arm for truth tellers all over the country, and I hope outside of the U.S. as well.
Gregory, you're shaking your head straight away.
Yeah, this is far from a good thing. This is appalling. Log Cabin Republicans has always condemned Chelsea Manning's actions that put military lives at risk. And when President Obama commuted essentially Chelsea Manning's sentence, what he was doing is he was sending a signal to those who've committed espionage or those who would commit espionage that the United States government is no longer taking those threats seriously. This sets a terrible precedent for the future. Putting aside the fact that Chelsea Manning is someone who is transgender, it shouldn't matter your sexual orientation, your gender identity. If you commit crimes and espionage of all things that put American and military lives at risk, you should pay the full penalty.
Chase, let me just put that point straight to you. I mean, do you acknowledge, do you accept that Manning put lives at risk?
I think that's ridiculous. You know, the government had every opportunity in the very long court martial of Chelsea Manning to present evidence that lives had been harmed or put at risk. They came up with nothing. The real danger to American statecraft isn't some moderate degree of transparency, it's the extreme levels of secrecy. This is what led us into the bloodbath of the Iraq invasion. And a generation earlier, this is what made the Vietnam War possible. You know, the worst blunders, the worst disasters of American statecraft would not have been possible but for dystopian levels of secrecy. And the very moderate level of transparency that Chelsea Manning introduced, I'd like to point out that nothing that Manning leaked was top secret or higher, and that what she leaked is well under 1% of what the federal government classifies in any given year.
I can see Gregory trying to get again shaking his head. So no lives put at risk. A lot of this stuff was classified, but none of it top secret. That is what Chase is saying.
So does that make Chelsea Manning a hero? I mean, this is what's happening now. You have people, especially, well, I would most definitely disagree with that sentiment, and there are many members of the LGBT community in particular who disagree with the sentiment that Chelsea Manning is some sort of hero. Because she's not.
Well, okay. One area where I think we might agree is that Manning's gender identity and sexual preference really has little to do with the leak itself. This is something that enemies of Chelsea Manning have put forward, saying that she only leaked what she leaked because, well, transgender people are weird and they will do crazy things. In fact, her motive was very political. And I think that's what Gregory and I are arguing about today. I think it's very good if we know what our government is doing. Our log cabin Republican seems to disagree and thinks the more government secrecy you have, the better.
No, I did not say that. I did not say that. And let me go back to your first point. Yes, while Chelsea Manning should not be demonized for being transgender, and while I do not agree that any of the crimes that she is guilty of and is serving a sentence for were motivated by her gender identity, I think what the danger was in all of this was people saying that her sentence should be commuted because of her gender identity. Look, Log Cabin Republicans has been out there for 40 years saying that we are equal and deserving of equality and the same protections, rights, responsibilities. And in the cases where LGBT people commit crimes, the law should be applied equally to
Gregory,
us.
you're not saying, though, Gregory, you're not saying that in some way she or her campaigners somehow use that issue to get early release, or is that what you're saying?
I mean, I know people who are saying specifically that Chelsea Manning should be released because as a transgender individual, she was susceptible to heightened risk in prison. That was most definitely one of the reasons that people used in favor of President Obama's wrongful commutation of her sentence.
Let me move it on.
I don't know.
Go on.
I don't know which people Gregory is talking to there, but I think the strongest reasons for clemency in this case have nothing to do with Chelsea Manning's gender identity. It is interesting, though, that her gender identity might have helped keep her in the news a little bit more. And on balance, got her maybe more sympathy. I think that's a good thing. That's a sign of progress in the United States, that we're being more accepting of transgender people. It's about time.
Let me move it on. Gregory, let me ask you, I mean, that we had no pardon from Obama for Edward Snowden, but we have an incoming president keen to improve relations with Russia, at war with his own intelligence services. It is a real possibility that Trump could end up pardoning Edward Snowden.
Potentially. I mean, that's not something that log cabin Republicans would be supportive of either. I mean, I would say we are the most consistent LGBT advocacy organization out there. We're not only consistent in our application of equality, but we are consistent in our upholding conservative principles, as well as our adherence to national security matters. So just as we disapprove of President Obama's commutation of Chelsea Manning's sentence, any sort of clemency that would be granted to Edward Snowden is something that we would also oppose.
Chase, what's your view? Because you were saying that Chelsea Manning should be released. She was a whistleblower. The same is true for Edward Snowden, in your view?
Absolutely. I think he should be given a full pardon. I think that would have been the proper outcome for Manning too, but we'll take a commutation. I think it's highly unlikely. Donald Trump in the past has essentially called for Edward Snowden's head. I don't think that Snowden is going to be able to come home under President Trump. But I have a question for Gregory here. You know, Log Cabin Republicans is a group for LGBT community, people who are Republican. What percentage of the Republican Party do you think is rampantly homophobic? Because when I look at the Republicans today, I see tons of homophobia. And I get the impression right now from you, Gregory, that you're trying to be, in a way, more Catholic than the Pope, to keep as close to the straight and narrow and calling
Gregory,
for the
briefly respond, because I just want to come to one final area, but briefly respond to that question.
Yeah, right. You know, to use a blanket and an aggressive word like homophobia, what percentage of the Republican Party is homophobic? Almost none. There is rarely an office door that is closed to me on Capitol Hill in a Republican office. I mean, just yesterday at the Betsy DeVos hearing, Senator Lamar Alexander, conservative from Tennessee, entered a letter in support of Betsy DeVos's nomination into the public record. So, I mean, you know, there are shades of gray, and my time at Log Cabin Republicans has showed me that. To paint people as homophobic or not is
I've got time for one more question, Gregory, which is, do you fear at all, and we heard John McCain talking about this, we heard Mr. Ryan talking about it too, do you fear that in some way with this news, the military, the intelligence community will feel or fear that it's open season on them?
Because President Obama commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence?
Yes.
I mean, I think there are most definite concerns with the signal that Chelsea Manning's commutation sends to not only the intelligence community, but those people like the good gentleman who I'm debating with today, who think that it is not only open season on the intelligence community, but that you will have a free pass if you engage in criminal espionage activities.